Welcome to the 50th episode. Can you believe that? 50th episode of the Gateway Podcast. I'm your host, C.L. Thomas, broadcast live from the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM New Orleans. Can you really believe it's been 50 episodes? That means 50 weeks, you guys, that I've been talking to you about spirits and ghosts and a little bit about my life. And I really am appreciative of you guys supporting the show and being there and talking and I'm being distracted by a Maine Coon cat right now, so I apologize. But tonight I'm back from the road. I'm back in Las Vegas. I've been away for almost a month and a half now. I've been on the road, just going all over the place. And in that short time, well, a long time for me, we've elected a new president, and it seems like everyone on social media has just kind of gone crazy about this. I understand what everybody's saying. As a bipartisan myself, it's my prayer that we continue to keep our country and leaders in prayers, despite what side you guys attune to, because a house divided is a house that falls, unfortunately. So we need to keep that in mind, especially you mediums out there. I hold you guys to a higher standard. You know this. You guys are called to live a higher conscious life, and if you claim to be of healing and of higher power and of love, then in this dark time, you really need to act like that. You need to act like it. So anyways, that's all I'm going to say about that. To continue this episode on the Gateway, I've been in Galveston over the weekend, and have you ever been in such a place that is steeped with pirate history? It's not something I've ever really expected to find myself in, but I was in the middle of these ruins of, it used to be an old fort where, and I'm probably going to say his name wrong, Jean Lafayette. He was in New Orleans, he was all over the Caribbean, and he was a pirate. It turned into the 18th century. And he had this fort, and he had a house right there in Galveston, right off of the island. And just interesting. I was there by myself, of course. I'm always alone on these trips, it seems like. And I got a couple of minutes I actually got access to the grounds. It's gated, so you really can't go on the property, but I ended up with permission, of course. And I got to do a short ITC session for a little bit of where this pirate held a fort. And the story is he was plundering different ships, whether it be Spanish, British. He was kind of all over the board. It was whoever hired this guy at the time. Like Andrew Jackson hired him at one point. But he started this whole community in Galveston. And he built a fort. He had a shanty town. It was full of scallywags and prostitutes and his stolen loot. That's where he would take all of his goods. He did raise 3 children there. But I'll post a little short video of what I found in this place. It's really interesting. So the Talk of Paranormal continues to be about UFO phenomena and government disclosures, but are we really asking the right questions? My guests tonight have spent decades, and I don't mean, a year in their, all of a sudden they know everything. We're talking decades, researching just who and what these beings are, and more importantly, what do they want? Leslie and Robert Shaw joined me to discuss their latest book, Who Are They? Let's get them on here. Hey guys, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having us. Actually, it's Stephen Shaw.
Stephen Shaw. Did I say your name wrong?
Yeah, call me Robert. That's okay. That's a good name too.
Yeah, it's a nice famous author, so that's fine.
Yeah, I just got back from Boston, and I must have been thinking about Robert Shaw, the guy who.
Exactly.
Yeah, he won. I think, Best Actor for the movie Jaws back in 1976. He was the captain on the
and there's
boat.
A famous poet as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Robert Shaw. He was a general that led the only black platoon in the Civil War at the time.
Yes, I remember seeing that movie. Yeah, Glory.
Mm-hmm.
Shaw's a good, solid name. Yeah,
right.
We're proud to own it.
We're honorable.
It was a big deal back in its day. When the real Robert Shaw, that is. The movie too. The movie's pretty good. Indeed. But anyway, back to the topic. You guys, how did you meet and how did you get back? How did you get into this field of UFO research?
Well, actually, I started my own research while I was an acupuncturist back in 1992. I just needed to start getting to the bottom of what had been going on in my family and my family's bloodline since I was age of 3. So I started that, and we met.
Yeah, and
I was a Tai Chi teacher, and she was one of my students.
yeah, I was studying Tai Chi with him, and after we got together, we did a lot of Kundalini raising work and energy practices together. And
Yeah, after I taught her the whole Tai Chi
yeah,
form, yeah.
and I saw my first UFO in 2005, and I had heard Stephen's stories for a long time, and nothing had happened to me. And I'm a dutiful wife, right? I believed what he was telling me, but there was always this tiny little kernel of doubt still. And then I saw my first UFO, and I said, "We really have to write that book now." And so I started my research then, and and we worked. We did a lot of research together, and um, I'm a journalist by trade. I'm part time now, but so I did the majority of the writing. But Steve wrote his family's history into the book, and also we're co-researchers and co-theorists.
Yes.
Got it. So before we continue, is there a way that you can turn your microphone up just a little bit?
Sure. How's that? Is that
That-
better?
yes, yes, much better.
Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me too?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Stephen, in the notes that you sent over to me, you have a lot going on with your childhood in UFOs. Can you talk a little bit of what happened and how you got into ufology?
Well, actually, my first experiences started when I was 3, and this was not UFOs. I was told from a young child that we had a family spirit guide called Oglegli, and I was I used to be visited in the middle of the night by this invisible being, a 2-footed being that would playfully jump on my stomach and my chest. Certainly not a cat. Um, I I could tell the difference for
Yeah,
sure.
and we don't have invisible cats.
Right. So that went on, and then when I was at the age of 8, I was sleeping in a bunk bed and the top of the bunk bed, and I heard this strange noise I didn't recognize. I knew it wasn't the dog, but I still was curious. But so I got out of the bed and I was walking down the hallway, and there was a little light on the kitchen so I could see where I was going. And my heart was pounding, and I just thought, I don't know what that is, and I was really scared. So I was awake, and just before I got to the end of the hallway, I blacked out. And so the next thing I remembered, I remember being back in my bunk bed, and with no clue as far as what had happened in the living room. And then when I was 11 years old, I saw my first UFO, which was just happened to be going from north to south in the air at about 9:30 at night, and it was this large orange globe that was kind of just going slowly horizontally, then kind of stopped a bit and then kept on moving on. And I called Griffith Park Observatory the next night about it, and they said well, our telescopes aren't pointed in that direction, so they had no idea.
They blew them off a little.
But to go back to the whole O'Glegley thing, for 4 generations, my family bloodline, going back to Germany and England and to different parts of California, have had interactions with. It's always a tall, skinny, 6.5 foot tall entity, sometimes appearing to be black with a hat. My brother saw it in 1982 as a tall gray alien. I saw it as a blue white light being of 6.5 feet tall in 1979. In fact, in 1979 was when the whole Shaw family, in 2 different locations separated by 350 miles, had experiences happening at the same time. And the main thing that happened that was nobody's been able to explain to me since, or ever, is how all the coins in my pocket were magnetized by this entity that paralyzed my body and said into my ear, said, "Hi, Steve," in a whisper, and pulling with it all the whole room was filled with blue white light. And this was like at 5:30 in the morning, 1979 in January. And this is something that, 6 hours later, that my dad and I, we were workmen, we were cabinet makers, and we were getting ready to get some lunch. And so I decided to say, I'll go get some lunch. So I pulled the coins out of my pocket of the clothes I've been wearing the night before, and all the coins were magnetic. I could pick them up. My dad could pick them up by the edge, by the face. It didn't matter. They were all magnetized.
The whole family had these kinds of experiences where they would see something frequently terrifying. Their heart would be pounding and they'd be frightened half to death, and then suddenly they would black out and missing time. They'd have like 2-3 hours of missing
And this
time.
and this whole time, we had thought that this entity, thought this entity called O'Glegley was a spirit, a family spirit, or some type of entity like that. It wasn't until we found out what my brother had seen, and also the unexplainable. Oh, to back up a little bit, couple nights before that, my dad came into my room and said, "Stephen, I'm hearing a silver bell being rung in the wall." So I went into the living room at 9:30 at night, and sure enough, because I'm a lifelong musician, so I know what a silver bell sounds like. Okay, so there's like ding, ding, ding that was going off in the wall, right in where the 2x4 is, right, in the solid part of the wall. And we looked up the chimney and up the flue, and then we got my sister, who was 13 at the time, and first thing she said was, "Where's that bell coming from?" And sure enough, we all heard the bell. Went on for a good 10 minutes. We banged on the wall, trying to make sense of it.
And then the other house they were building, 350 miles away, his mother was staying there with his brother because he started school earlier up there.
Yeah,
And she heard a bell ring, and she thought it must be the phone. So she picked up the phone, and there was this strange voice on the line that said, "I am the invisible Beachy," and we still have no idea what that means.
it
But
could have been O'Glegley, it could on Beachy, but anyway.
yeah.
So I asked my brother about it that morning, and my brother said, "Stephen, the phone didn't ring, but Mom did pick up the phone, and she was having a conversation, and then she put the phone down." So, anyways, this was happening the exact same time that we had the silver bell happening.
And
So
they tend to come in clusters, these events. Like his family, this one he's talking about now was a cluster of 5 things. 5
yes,
nights in a row, something weird happened. Like one night, he felt this invisible being pushing his bed, and then it tapped on his shoulder 3 times.
yeah, it pushed the bed three separate times.
Yeah, and then he rolls
Always
over,
always twice,
And so
like shove, shove from the base where my feet were, because I was sleeping on the bottom of the bunk bed at that point in my life. My brother was up north with my mom in the house that we were building. And so yeah, that one night that happened before, the night before my coins were magnetized, that was the night where it was shoved twice, 3 different times, and then I was tapped on the shoulder on my right deltoid, just like somebody with an index finger was tapping my shoulder lightly. But you could definitely tell I was being tapped, and
again, he blacked
and
out,
then I
right?
blacked out when I
The
turned
energy
around.
wasn't focused on just one person, and it wasn't, related to just one property. It seemed like it
Right.
was
Right.
your entire family.
It
Do you
moved from countries, several countries too.
Germany and England and then California.
We've recently discovered that, well, I mean, we've known it for years, that there's some sort of a psychic connection to the UFO phenomenon because Stephen's family are very, very psychic people.
Mhm.
For the last 4 generations, the women in his family have almost all been automatic writers. Well, they'll go into a trance, and old Glegley will speak to them, and they'll write it down through this automatic writing. And so
Are you is your
we
family known, or is your family known mediums, Stephen?
Actually,
back in England, yeah.
my grandmother and her sister did practice that stuff, back in England,
They were spiritualists, yeah.
pre World War II, and that they learned it from their from the German like their mothers, their mothers from Germany. I've only been able to go back 4 generations so far. I don't know any more past the
But it went
four
from
generations.
Germany to England, then to Southern California, then to Central California. So it definitely isn't like a haunting where it's,
No,
the hauntings to me, it always seem to be like locked to a place more than anything else. But,
Right.
um,
Or it's latched to a person.
or yeah,
and
or
I do have precognitive abilities too. In fact, it's funny. Within the past 4 years, I've had 3 specific precog events that have happened to me, and so far 2 of them have come true. The third one has yet to be seen, but I did warn the person ahead of time. So I don't know why now, when at the age of 64 in my 60s, why I'm having more precog.
it's
Uh,
just normal for his family, I think, because he reads my mind constantly. And then recently, we read, Luis Elizondo's book. He's the fellow that, released
the Go Fast Gimbal and
Yeah.
the Puck.
he released this, very important story to the New York Times in 2017, and the 3 now famous videos, and he wrote a book recently, and when we read the book, he said that, the US government did MRI tests and PET scans on the brains of abductees and discovered that they have the same kind of brains that people with ESP have
And remote viewers.
and remote viewers. So definitely is a
There's
psychic connection.
a region of the brain that crosses over the the corpus callosum, which is the dividing line between both of the hemispheres of the brain. It's called the parahippocampal gyrus, for a fancy term out there, but it is larger and more developed in people that have the ability to have ESP and psychic abilities. In fact, he devoted a whole 6 pages in his book Imminent, talking about how he was trained by the U.S. government how to do remote viewing, and he said that it is something that you have to be taught how to do. And funnily enough, after he started doing it, started getting to be pretty good at it, these orbs started showing up outside of his house at nighttime, and it kind of freaked he and his wife out. It's interesting to see how the U.S. government has actually put serious money
Mhm.
into remote viewing because they see it as being a real phenomena. So that's why the
Yeah,
There's a whole
paranormal,
program out there, the Gateway program.
the Gateway
yeah,
program, yes.
there,
Yeah.
And
yes,
we know from that program, some of the people that, became remote viewers for the program actually ended up with gray aliens, in their bedrooms. So I think what happens is that they can tune in to the psychic abilities of the people that they're near or, around, and they can, like, I have a lot of reports of UFOs. They're cruising along, right? And someone will see it, and they'll think to themselves, "Oh my god, there's a UFO." And then the UFO stops in its tracks and turns towards them and starts coming towards them. It's like they can sense certain types of minds, and, it's one of the things that where they start preying on those people that they can
at
sense.
least paying attention.
It's
Yes.
interesting because I've been through the Gateway program twice, and what it's done for
Really?
me, I didn't get to see gray aliens yet, but what it has done is it's really helped me with things like depression. It's helped me on the artistic side.
Wow.
It's helped me with mediumship quite a bit. It's opened like an entire door of spiritualism for me that it was there in the past, but not quite like it is now, if that makes
Mhm, mhm, and that makes absolute sense, exactly. It's like what we see, for instance, telepathy. Telepathy is almost like, in a way, like thinking of the appendix. It's something that was much more important in the past and was much more developed, and now it's kind of just it's just kind of just
Vestigial, you know?
it's vestigial, but it's something that we have the ability to use. In fact, telepathy is the most effective way of communicating. And
We think that, it used to be a human characteristic, that we have let atrophy in ourselves, but we call them cousins because we think that people flying the UFOs are actually related to
that's
humans.
what we have found.
Yes,
Yes.
that's our theories.
it's interesting.
And
Um,
so it hasn't atrophied in them. They've kept it as a,
And
a
there's
skill.
a
so they're
reason
more
for that.
pure, in other words, and more spiritual than we are.
Yeah,
Is
there's
that
a
what you're
reason
saying?
for it. It happened 12,850 years ago,
Yeah.
plus or minus
Well,
10 years. So
what's interesting about what you just said about your experiences growing up, it seems like you have, a conglomerate of different energy activity in your house. You have the time lapse, you have the UFO sightings, you have the orbs, you have almost like the Hat Man figure. And then you have these series, these clusters of threes of activity that happens almost like a poltergeist. But then when you take in the factor number three, that's associated a lot with like demonic and negative entities out there and those
yeah,
kind of
the Hat Man thing has nothing to do with it.
Well,
My
I don't know.
uncle,
He's been seen
my
wearing a hat.
I've never seen Old Glugly wearing a hat.
His uncle did, though.
My uncle did, whose life was saved in Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka. He was in the Royal Air Force post World War II, and he was a British guy, grew up in northern England, and he'd heard about Old Glugly from his wife and his mother-in-law, and his last name was Griffiths. His first name was Doug. So anyway, he was about 22 years old, and he was awakened in the middle of the night he was on his cot in this outdoor tent that they would be a multi-man tent. It would be about like 40 men in a tent. When I was in the military for 6 years, we would have 40 men in a tent. So that scanned, right for me. So anyways, he was awakened by this tall, skinny, black entity that happened to be wearing a hat. He called it a red fez. Okay. And this entity said, Douglas, you have to get up and leave right now. There's a raiding party coming and you will be killed. He got up out of his cot and the entity just was gone. But he heard about Old Glugly, so he paid attention and he got out of the tent. And sure enough, a minute or two later, a raiding party came through, a very short period of time. And they had machetes and guns and they killed several of the officers. So my uncle relayed this story to me when I was a young man, maybe 14, 15. And I took it seriously because he was a very serious man. He was also very wealthy.
We think
And
that they prey on the family and
so I was
also protect the family.
right. They pray and they protect. So, anyways, when his daughter became of age to be able to drive a car, he bought her a Triumph, an English Triumph, a white Triumph. I always remember this because the license plate was O'Glegley.
Yeah, it's like he was thanking him, sort of, for saving his life.
That's right.
When we first started researching the the abduction phenomenon, at first we thought what the theories at the time were that the aliens are just curious about us. They just want to take a cross sampling of samples, no big deal. But then, as we researched it, it didn't take long to find out that that was not what was happening. They tend to find a family line, a genetic line of people that meet their criteria, and they will take those people again and again and again, and then they'll start taking their children and their grandchildren. And they assign like a alien handler per family, and we think Old Glegley happens to be the Shaw family handler. And, like I say, he both protects and preys upon the family.
hmm
Now, when you say, he preys upon you, what exactly do you mean? What
Well,
are there some
the
examples?
taken thing where they're abducting, the kids.
Missing time. In other words, for instance, like
Yeah.
taking my DNA, took my brother's DNA.
And from women, they take
Yeah,
eggs, and men, they take sperm.
such as exactly.
Yeah. The whole anal probe thing we think is just that they're accessing the prostate directly
I have no idea about that, but I just know that
yeah.
and that in 1979, the last thing that happened was the final night. My dad had been a cop in England from 52 to 56, and he was also in the RAF. So anyway, so after the night when my coins were magnetized, he awoke in the middle of the night and he saw this wall of blue white light coming out of my bedroom, just encompassing the whole doorway. And he was just getting, kind of tired and upset about this thing. And what's all this then? That type of British cop would say, right? So he was getting out of bed to go see what the heck was going on, and this voice inside his head said, "Jeffrey, just go back to sleep. No problem. Nothing to see here.
Everything's
Everything's
fine.
fine." And that's exactly what he did. He told me about it at breakfast time,
Although,
and I have no memory of that at all. I have no memory of anybody coming into my room. My dad saw it. I have no idea. I could have been taken. I could have been,
he probably was.
probably was like my
Yeah.
brother. So
But they always
Yeah.
return you guys, right? You
So
don't just
far, yes.
so far, yeah.
We think they do sometimes take people though and don't put them back. And
yeah, there's
yeah.
especially around the national forests,
Yes.
such
That's a
as
big one.
yeah, all those people that end up missing, they think that they're being abducted somewhere.
hmm It's become very common. There's one or two gentlemen that have been doing a study on that, and it's not just due to cougars and bears or
Yeah.
like people being murdered or being kidnapped. It's just there are numerous tales actually of hikers that are hiking together and somebody's a few feet ahead of them or a couple hundred feet
And
ahead
they
of them
just
and they
vanish.
just
Yeah.
vanish. Okay.
And Alaska, over the last 30 years, the state of Alaska has 16,000 missing persons. And Alaska has 2 alien bases that we know of, U.S. military/alien bases. One under Mount Hayes, and then there's the Black Pyramids. So it's a UFO hotspot, Alaska. And even though they have a very small population relative
Yes.
to their size,
Very small.
it has a lot of missing people. And I'm sure, like I said in the documentary, sure, there's a lot of people dead in a crevasse, maybe, or eaten by a grizzly bear, but that can't account for all
Yeah.
16,000 people.
Yeah,
obviously.
I mean, what better place to have something set up like that than Alaska?
Yeah.
We're so remote, it's less traveled, it's kinda out there on its own.
Yes.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
the other place I think about a lot too is, I know we talked a little bit before you got on here, Joshua Tree Forest. That place has a lot of strange activity,
A lot of
UFO
UFO
activity
activity
around
there.
it, to the point where musicians were flocking out there in the '60s because they
Yeah.
felt like they were channeling these beings to write music.
Yeah.
So
The giant rock festivals were
Yeah.
all UFO festivals. Yes.
Yeah, Graham was
Mhm.
out here, and also
Graham
too,
Parsons,
yeah,
Yes.
right, Graham
yeah.
Parsons, and then of course, then the one of the U2 albums was called the Joshua Tree.
Mhm.
So there's been it's actually a beautiful park, and it's you see some of the best Joshua trees in the world, of course, and it's people do get lost out there. I mean,
Mhm.
we hear about once or twice a year
I work for
there
the
be
local paper up there, and we we definitely have missing persons that sometimes show up as skeletons
but
years
it's mostly
later.
they get lost in the canyons, and then they're found
Yeah.
later, or their bodies are found later. It's
What's interesting about the Joshua Tree, I did some studying up there about a year ago. Actually, it was Thanksgiving. I stayed, some friends and I went camping out there, and, after Thanksgiving, we stayed right there in the park, and then after Thanksgiving, I spent another 2 days there by myself in the room that Graham Parsons passed away in.
Oh, you did? Oh,
I
neat.
did, I was friends with Phil Kaufman when I lived in Nashville and stuff, so the story goes way back, and he's
Oh,
always
yes, you
told
know
me
him well then, yeah.
yeah. He's always told me, "You need to go there because you're into this paranormal, you need to go there." And sure enough, I've done some ITC research phenomenon. I've gotten so many interesting EVPs from this place.
They say
And
it's haunted for sure.
yeah, oh, definitely. But, for me, it wasn't a bad haunting. Everybody likes to place, that negativity on the place, and
Yeah,
that's not what I found at all. But
no.
yeah, I had a camera running all night, and you hear a full-fledged conversation going on between 3 people in the room. I was asleep. So and there was nobody else on the properties. So it's really interesting. You can't really make out what they're saying, but you could distinctly make out a male that's responding
Mhm,
to her, and
mhm.
you just go back and forth.
I
Um
used to yeah, I used to interestingly you say that because when I was 25 at the Fallbrook house where all this weirdness happened with the blue white light, my dad had, decided to stop doing cabinet making in Woodland Hills and moved up with my mom up to Sonora, California, so I had the house to myself, And I was still doing cabinet making, but I would take kind of a break at lunchtime, and I would go into my bedroom and just lay down and just kind of go, just relax and just slow down my breathing and just try and get like a power nap kind of thing, right? And I'd already been studying Tai Chi at that point for like 8 years, so I was very good at controlling my breath. And I would hear these conversations like two disc jockeys or two guys were talking on the radio, doing a radio show, and it was clear as day. It was, again, it's like what you're saying. You can hear them talking, but you can't quite make
Mhm.
out what they're actually saying, but you know that it's English, but you can't quite make it out. So the
Right.
first time it happened to me, I got up out of my bed and I thought it was my neighbor Harold. I thought, why does he have the radio playing so loud? This is 1985, right? And so I said, what the heck, Harold? And so I got up out of bed and there was nothing. He's not playing anything. There's no TV on in my house, so I went back to, trying not off again, and the
We
same thing happened.
we both experienced clairaudience,
Yeah,
especially when after we got together. Stephen was a Tai Chi master by then, and he'd which is a moving meditation, and in any kind of meditation, it opens the chakras. So he started having he would spontaneously astral project, and he would hear into the astral realm a lot.
frequently.
And then I started doing the practices too, and it started happening to me as well. So it's just a birthright that humanity has that we just don't exercise very
Right.
much. I think anybody can open their chakras enough and make themselves more psychic.
It helps if you start early, for instance, and also too, like certain medications will certainly, block that off.
And come from a really psychic family, Stephen. That
Yes,
helps a lot.
yes, that helps too. Yes. My mom knew. My mom picked me up. I very clearly. She picked me up when I was 9 years old in 1969. She picked me up from elementary school, and she was bawling. And I said, "Mommy, what's wrong?" She said, "My mom just died. She just fell down some stairs and she died." I said, "Well, how do you know that? She's in England. We're here in California, right?" So, well, I got this feeling, and I had the automatic write, and I wrote this down, and I was told that she fell down some cobblestone stairs and she died because she fractured her hip and she died. So when my dad came home from woodworking, she told my dad, and my dad, probably 90% believed her, but said, "Well, have you got a call?" Yes, I said, "No, nobody's called," but I went into automatic writing, and so the next day, like
Official word arrived,
official
yeah,
word arrived that she had died, and
and
she
exactly the same way she
exactly the same way, and
described,
and the
yeah.
same thing when her father died,
And
she
Uncle
and
Clifford
Uncle
too,
Clifford too,
yeah.
and I also read a lot of her stuff that she wrote that she couldn't have known about, that only my dad and I knew about. It's just like something. It was just I grew up with in a family that we only really talked about it amongst ourselves and only occasionally, because number one, like when you're a kid growing up going to school, you don't want to tell your friends about these
Yeah.
kind of things. They're going to think either that you're lying, that you're crazy, or that you're living in a haunted house.
Mhm.
I always never really felt comfortable around people per se. I didn't like go out, and have a bunch of friends. I wasn't a preppy. I just never really felt like I really belonged in
And
a
they didn't
sense.
like talking about it. The family
Yeah.
were rather reticent about it, and, it was kinda like we had to pry the information out of them but finally, at one point, we had to sit down with the whole family and kinda get to the bottom of what had happened to everybody and we learned a lot. That's when we learned from Philip, Stephen's brother. Stephen's brother suffered a great deal from the trauma of being abducted, we believe, in his early life, and later in life, he became paranoid and,
And he started hearing things that weren't there
yeah,
too.
he was a brilliant man, but he was not emotionally sound pretty much his whole life. He became hermit and miserly, and
Do you
then
think it's
he
because of
finally
the
ended up
activity?
killing himself and his mother, on his 51st birthday. It was quite the tragedy in our family.
Yeah.
Do you
But,
believe it's because of the energy that he experienced?
Well, toward the end of his life, after my dad died like about 2.5 months before he killed my mom and killed himself. And unfortunately, you're not gonna like to hear this, but he killed both his cats first.
yeah.
Okay. Right. And but by the way, I had a Maine Coon called Smokey for quite a number of years, and he was a great cat. But anyway, my brother started accusing Leslie and myself of like stealing coffee
And we
and
lived
different
like
things.
400 miles away. Somehow we were
Yeah,
sneaking in at night,
455 miles away. But he installed cameras in and outside the house, and he didn't take my dad's passing very well at all. And my mom was extremely ill with fourth stage
Parkinson's.
well, she had Parkinson's and fourth stage arthritis.
Mm.
So she was a 24/7 thing, but she was stubborn. She didn't want to die. And so I think the combination of things, and also, like I say, he started hearing things like things crashing in the wall, and he thought that I was up there and I was like searching through books.
But Stephen's been hearing these bizarre
I've been hearing it my whole
things his
life.
whole life, yeah.
I've been hearing the three taps behind my head on the wall,
trying to go to sleep.
trying to go to sleep. I've heard musical instruments, people's voices, doors slamming, the things
Glass breaking.
Yeah, the things he started to hear. It's just like, okay, that's number like 557 for me, and he'd only heard a couple times in his life, and he thought it was me. That when I was up there, helping out with my mom, he thought it was me doing stuff.
We spoke to a psychologist one time about it, and she said that actually this early kind of PTSD, early trauma, frequently ends up with this kind of condition later in life, the paranoia and
But he was actually hearing. He was getting clear audience.
Yeah.
He was hearing things like I've heard for most of my life.
So we started like researching the UFO phenomenon, and originally the idea at the time was that these creatures are coming from all different star systems. The grays come from over there, and the tall gray, the taller grays come from over there,
and the tall whites,
and the
Nordics,
and the Nordics from over here, and
what are all the categories to these things? And
there's a lot. Yeah, there's
what is he exactly? Is that a spirit? Is that a being? What is it?
As far as we can tell, the vast majority of them are corporeal bipedal beings.
Yeah, bipedal hominids.
I've been to some seminars where there's some really wild stuff going around that is so much in my opinion, it is complete hogwash and disinformation. I mean, I'm sure that there are highly developed, spiritual beings that, let's say, for instance, that are a million years ahead of us.
But that's not what we're dealing with here.
I certainly do not discount the spiritual world at all. Not at all, not from my experience. But I think what I found is that the way that they communicate with us, they find people that have the ability. It's like, for instance, if most people could only listen to, let's say, radio frequency 97.1, okay, that's pretty limited. But let's say, for instance, I can listen to 96.9 and 97.3. All right. And also I can slow my brain waves down to like about 4 to 6 cycles per second. That is the way, because they are telepathic. That's what we found. They are telepathic, that they can communicate with people that have more of those abilities. And Tai Chi really did help me a lot, immensely, in my ability to be able to not freak out so much.
I think that's one of the things that why he didn't go insane like his brother. You know what I mean?
Right. My brother wouldn't learn. I tried to teach my parents and my brother Tai Chi, and of course, it's like, like if your husband's a doctor, or you're, like a doctor going to another doctor. The doctors make the worst patients. So,
but to get into our theory, theory a little bit about, because that's what we promise in our book, right? It's who they are and what they're up to. So to explain who they are, we started researching, like I said, and that they come from all different places, all these different types, but we couldn't make that fit our UFO data. We had thousands of reports of UFOs being launched from Earth, from out of lakes, out of the ocean, up out of volcanoes, out of the side of mountains, out of ridges, out of mesas, again and again and again. We keep hearing like a duck blind would open up on a mountain, and UFOs would shoot in and out of it, and then it would close back up again.
Is it like they live in the earth?
Yes, we think so.
Yeah, the American Indians, especially Native Indians, call them the Anunnaki. Some call them Anunnaki or ant people.
Yeah,
and they call them Star Brothers, but they do say that they come from underground.
And then there was the Admiral Byrd data.
She's asking a question. Did you ask a question?
Me? No.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Not yet, but I do have a question.
Sorry. Then there's the Admiral Byrd data. Most people have heard about his diary that where he flew his plane into an under the ice sheet world that opened up, but most people don't know about the attack of Operation High Jump. When Admiral Well, let me back up. Hitler in the late 30s, 1930s, had his U-boats combing the coast of Antarctica, and nobody could figure out why. And then one of the U-boat captains was quoted in the press as saying, "I have found a paradise under the ice for mein Führer." And then Hitler sent tons of equipment there, ships and engineers and mining equipment and personnel all down into Antarctica. And so after the war, the U.S. intelligence service surmised that there was a Nazi base somewhere under the ice sheet of Antarctica. And they sent Admiral Byrd with this armada down to Antarctica, essentially with the mission was to destroy this base. But what happened was, and we get this from a Russian intelligence report from 1947, but these flying saucers rose up out of the ocean, attacked the armada, shot some ray at it, and sank one of the ships and downed half of his aircraft. And then Operation High Jump essentially turned tail and ran back to Argentina. 2 months after only 2 months, and the operation was scheduled for 6 months. So we know that part for sure, that it terminated in only 2 months.
And we know that he spoke with the Argentinian press saying that we've come across an enemy that has the ability to fly from pole to pole in a matter of seconds.
Yes. And so we think that what happened is that after he got his butt kicked by the flying saucers, Admiral Byrd did not want to go back to Washington and tell the president that I have no idea who these people are or what they are. But they kicked our ass, So we think he flew his ship into this hole in the Antarctic ice sheet, which we have since learned is a real thing. That there's a big no-fly zone in Antarctica, which I think is strange anyway, right? Like, why? Who cares if people fly over the wasteland that is the ice sheet, But they do. They have this enormous no-fly zone, and this one pilot and his crew had a medical emergency, and they decided to break the rule and fly over anyway because this person needed medical care so quickly. And they ended up dying. But while he was flying over the ice sheet, he spotted an enormous hole in the ice sheet with a ramp going down into it. And he said it was big enough, like a football field. You could easily fly a plane into this hole. And so we think that that's exactly what happened. Admiral Byrd went into this ice hole and met with these beings he described them as men. They look like the Nordic aliens are indistinguishable from Caucasian Scandinavian humans. They're essentially tall Caucasian men, and that's who Byrd met with. And they told him, they said, well, we normally have nothing to do with you people that live on the surface and your barbaric wars. Sorry, I hit the cord. And your barbaric wars. But we have to make an exception now because you've learned to crack the atom, and This is a power that you should not be having. And it makes sense with our data because during World War II, the Foo Fighters were constantly following our planes. And ever since then, our military is being followed by UFOs. And we recently heard from pilots that this is happening every single time our ships go out on maneuvers.
And it's not just the U.S. It's the Chinese
and the Russians.
It's the Russians. Yeah. In fact, the Foo Fighters started about 1941, 42. The Japanese thought they were ours. We thought they were Japanese. We didn't know whether it was the Germans. We didn't know. Nobody knew about what the Foo Fighters were. All the pilots could say is that they were being chased by these oars, by these golden golden colored orbs that were following their planes.
So they're expending enormous resources to follow our nukes. They're also showing a lot of interest in our nuclear bases, like on land too, not just the military. But they've been spotted outside our nuclear research facilities, our nuclear bases, our military bases.
Is this all to prevent us from blowing the Earth up, you think?
I believe so, because we think they live under the Earth, so their motivation, like if they were from a distant star system, who cares if we blow ourselves up, right? Or maybe they would have they would care a little, but would they expend the kind of resources necessary to follow every nuclear weapon on the planet every single time?
And plus, people forget that since 1945, there have been 2,000 plus nuclear detonations, both subsurface, in the water, and also, air blasts of nuclear weapons.
And they're making quite clear that they're not happy about that.
No, their two main messages are take better care of the planet and stop playing around with nukes.
Yes.
Yeah, those are,
when they get their message across, it's always one of those two.
Like those group of children in Zimbabwe back about 25 or 30 years ago, when the little Greys met with them and they communicated with them telepathically. Their two messages were, you guys are messing up the Earth, stop messing up the Earth, and stop playing around with nuclear weapons.
And take better care of the planet. Yeah.
Now, is that their only motive, or do they generally care about human beings and want us to kind of live a higher vibrational life and higher conscious and all that? Is there a connection with that?
I certainly think that they are trying to get us to let me put it this way:
be higher vibrational, and less violent.
They certainly want us to do that. They want us to get out of the lower chakras, what I call like the fear, the anger, the more primal chakras. They didn't lose their technology or their culture when they went subsurface back 12,850 years ago. They did not lose that. And for instance, like if you had the ability to have telepathy, that was your primary mode of like communicating. With telepathy, it's a lot harder to lie to a person, because if they can read your mind, I can read your mind, and that kind of thing. So
it would be a very different society than ours.
Definitely, it's definitely a much different society, not based upon greed and avarice and the 7 deadly sins, or at least not as much.
And lies.
I think they naturally find us abhorrent, because partly they can't understand us, because we are just so prone to violence and other things. The human brain can do so much more than we're using it for, and they have a much higher capability of using it. What I can see is basically for more good,
And we think they met with Eisenhower. We know that our government became aware of these beings. In 1941, there was another crash ship, kind of like Roswell, but this time they managed to scoop up all the evidence and secret it over at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base without the media circus that became the Roswell incident. So we know that they know about them from then, at least, maybe before too, but we know at least by then they certainly were aware of them. And then Admiral Byrd came back to Washington and was debriefed and muzzled for the rest of his life. He never spoke another word about it, except that this diary was discovered posthumously by his son amongst his personal effects.
Well, that's just it. Why is the government so keen on covering all of this up, especially in today's day and age?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of reasons for that.
Yeah, we think there's a lot
of reasons.
Like they would have to, first of all, they would have to admit that they're not in charge. And the USA, I think, likes to pretend that they're in charge, of the world. Also, we think that the War of the Worlds thing that Orson Welles did,
1938.
He did this program on the radio where it was, it was the War of the Worlds story that the Martians had invaded, and people who tuned in late and didn't realize that it was just a radio show thought it was real, and the panic that ensued, I think it caused the government to rethink the ability to let us ever know. Also, we think Eisenhower struck a deal with them to get, well, in this meeting, he met with the Nordic aliens, the ones that look exactly like humans, and they wanted us to give up our nukes, and obviously they didn't get what they wanted. But what they did the deal they did make was that Eisenhower and we would keep their secret in exchange for some of their technology. And it was the beginning of the Cold War, right? So making sure we could stay ahead of Russia was really on their minds, of course, at that time. And now they can't really tell us the truth because they've been lying to us for 80 years,
If these beings look like us so much, well, I guess the Caucasians, do they walk amongst us?
Yes.
Yes, we believe so. That we think that's what the breeding program is all about. About 10% of abductees are women who are taken and impregnated, and then 4 months later they're taken again, and the fetus is stolen. And Stephen, you said like with the ultrasound, they've been actually able to prove that this is
They're
really
always
happening.
taken. The fetuses are always extracted about at the 5 centimeter size, which is about the size of a baseball. And we know now from ultrasound, because with technology and whatnot, that the doctors are saying, and this happens to some of these women 2, 3, and 4 times in their lifetime, that the
Oh,
doctor says,
wow.
yes, you were pregnant. Yes, the fetus was developing, but now it looks like you were never pregnant at all.
Because when they
Okay.
steal the fetus, they also take all the placenta intact, which of course does not happen in a miscarriage. Rather,
Mhm.
the tissue is left inside the womb until the doctors, clear it out.
Lock, stock, and barrel.
Yeah. So it looks like there was just scraped clean, and
Well, actually, not even scraped clean. It's just basically just gone. There's no evidence of any scar tissue. It's
Yeah, I was
just
just gonna ask that.
taken
Wouldn't there be
away.
some kind
yeah,
of scar tissue left over?
No,
it's all gone.
no
It's
scar tissue.
empty. Yeah,
Scar tissue would be indicative of not a miscarriage, but what do they call it?
an abortion.
An abortion. Yeah. Why am I blanking on that? Yeah. Yeah.
But then sometimes years later, the women are taken again and introduced to their hybrid alien offspring that are able to communicate with them, and they make it clear that you're my real mommy kind of thing. And we think that what would the point of a breeding program be, right? Except possibly infiltration
Or reintroduction.
or possibly reintegration at some point. We think they're trying to change us slowly from the inside out, so to speak.
Interesting.
Yeah, but the development, the problem is, I know I've said this before, and it's not completely true, or well, not completely correct, but I think that they weren't expecting us to be 8 billion people so quickly.
Yeah.
I think that, we do have problems in that way.
Yes.
And we all know that we're putting a tremendous strain on the environment. And, if we're cohabitating, which we see, and what we totally found from our research, that our cousins, as we call them, are not happy with what we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay. They can see the future as far as what's going to be happening, and it doesn't look good. Okay. We got to do something, and we cannot be behaving the way we've been behaving.
And they actually explained to Bird why they are taking people. Maybe is they said, we're going to protect the flower of your race from complete annihilation. And we think that's how they're doing it. We think they're actually taking people, and protecting the race from annihilation.
And what we've also found too is that they actually still need us.
We think so,
We think,
yes.
cow mutilations, for instance. Why would light beings be so interested in all, exsanguinating a cow, thousands and thousands of cows, and all the domesticated animals of man? What would be the need for them to have cow blood and cow eyes and cow tongues and
Yeah,
and,
and
and sex organs?
it's interesting you mentioned that too, because these mutilations, from what I've read, they take the organs and they're like clean cuts and stuff. They just
Yes.
Surgically
take parts of the
precise
organ
cuts, cauterizing as they go, which is something we can't
yes,
do.
as if
We
they're
think
gonna
that
put them
sorry,
somewhere else,
we
maybe
think that
grow
when
them
they
in a
went
ditch or something.
underground I'm sorry, darling. You were saying?
It's almost as if they were putting them in some sort of scientific lab in a dish or something to try to grow them, similar to what we're doing with um, genetics right now,
Yeah, we think
cloning
that
and all
they
that.
maybe took herds with them underground when they went underground, and those
Mhm.
herds are maybe becoming non-viable living
less
underground.
less viable, less genetically viable, and that could be very very well to do with all the nuclear detonations, or just that
Or just no vitamin D, not enough vitamin
right,
D.
exactly. But there's a reason for why they're doing it, and it's 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 necessity. Whenever you look at it, it
Right.
always boils down to necessity. Why are they taking human genetic DNA and also the genetic DNA of the animals of man? Is because they're related to us and because they need it.
We're,
Okay.
we're not the only people to have a theory about them actually being a branch of humanity. We call it a breakaway branch of humanity. But we are the only ones that I know of to attribute the cause of the schism in our
Genetic lines.
races, our populations, to the Great Flood. I studied the Great Flood in college, and one of the things that we think happened is that 13,000 years ago, there were some advanced civilizations on the planet that spotted the Younger Dryas comet coming. The Younger Dryas comet struck the Lake Superior area 12,850 years ago, and it's responsible for the miniature extinction event, North America. We lost the Clovis people all at once, and we lost the woolly mammoth and the mastodon. The large animals of the plains seem to have all been wiped out. The stilt bear, the American horse and camel, a bunch of other animals were all wiped out at the same time. And now we know the cause. For years, people didn't know why, but the Younger Dryas comet has finally been correctly dated to 12,850 years ago. So we
Mm.
think that someone on this planet, like all the flood myths, there's like 1,200 separate flood myths on the planet from 1,200 separate cultures, all with a flood myth, a Noah's Ark story in their ancient lore. And they all start the same way almost, where somebody warns them that a flood is coming. God warns them, or God, an emissary of God, or a disembodied voice warns the people that a terrible flood is coming and you'd better build an ark or you better go underground. So we think that's kind of what happened. They saw this comet coming, and the people in the know started building these underground cities to retreat to. And then after the comet struck, the climate upheavals were so drastic for 1,000 years you couldn't grow crops in the northern hemisphere.
It's very difficult, especially, yeah.
So the few surface survivors had to resort to being hunter gatherers again just to survive.
Hmm.
And most of the flood myths end the same way too, where mankind is almost wiped out. We're sinking into barbarity and cannibalism, and it looks like the surface people are going to finally die out. Then a
Well,
god or a god's emissary shows up and civilizes the people, brings back animal husbandry
Medicine and mathematics.
and essentially the trappings of civilization given back to them, and then they disappear again.
well, Leslie, we are just about out of time already. Can you believe that? We are at the end of the
Yeah,
hour.
that's fine. We managed to get the most of the theory out
A
there.
little
I
bit,
know.
yeah.
I wanted to hear. I wanted to talk more about giants too, and we just didn't get to it tonight in the
Shoot, yeah.
Anunnaki. But listen, where can people find your book?
It's on Amazon and Ingram, and again, the name is Who They Are and What They're Up To. And we have a wonderful documentary out called Who on YouTube called Who They Are. It was done by Jeremy Norrie and Jay Horton. They're
Sky Island Storytelling. It's already had 381,000
1,000 views.
views.
Yeah, we're thrilled with the
So it's
response.
kind of really cool.
So
Nice.
people can get more of the theory there, and
Right.
and we also have an Instagram page at leslie.shaw.author, and we'd love to hear from people. If you have experiences you want to share, just DM us there.
All right. Well, you guys, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show tonight.
And thank you
And
for
listen,
having
I'm
us.
going to have you guys back on And we'll do like an entire show just on one theory, because I think we could fill up the hour on just one theory.
Okay.
I think so too.
Okay.
You've been listening to The Gateway, your portal to the unexplained, the mystical, and the otherworldly, broadcast live from the United Public Radio 107.7 FM New Orleans. I'm your host, C.L. Thomas, and I will be back next week for a whole new show. Stay tuned.